This week I received an email from one of my cousins who has recently been diagnosed with cancer, and she's gone through surgery related to the cancer and has been going through some recovery and has had some unexpected complications. And in dealing with those complications, she's just not been sure what the next step is going to be or what's going to her recovery is going to entail. And in her email she said, "The unknown is sometimes scarier than dealing with what you know you have to do." Sometimes the unknown is scarier than dealing with what you know you have to do. I reflected on her comments as it relates to faith. It's easier to have faith when you know exactly what to do next. It's easier to have faith when you know what the outcome is going to be. But when we face uncertainties and the unknown, often our natural response is not faith, but rather our natural response is fear. The book of Daniel is filled with stories of faith. About Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We talked about them a little bit last week. They were some teenage boys that were good Jews that had grown up in Jerusalem, but Jerusalem had been attacked by King Nebuchadnezzar, and they were taken back as captives to Babylon. And so they find themselves in an unfamiliar territory, not knowing what their future is going to hold, not knowing what it's going to mean to live in captivity. But they find themselves in a privileged position in that they are in the king's court. They're being trained there. They're eating from the king's table. But it creates a crisis for them in that in eating from the king's table, they are breaking Jewish dietary laws. But it says that they found favor in the eyes of their captors, and that they were able to eat something different in order that they could remain faithful to the God that they served. It was an issue that God made a way in their life when there seemed to be no way. And as I look in the pages of Scripture, it seems that so often when God intervenes, when God makes a way when there seems to be no way, God's intervention often comes after the person has taken a step of faith. I think about Noah. Noah who built the ark. And it was after that step of faith in building the ark that God delivered him through the floodwaters. Or with Moses, who raised his staff, and it was after he raised his staff in faith that the waters of the Red Sea parted and they walked through on dry land. Or as the children of Israel were going into the promised land, the priest took a step of faith into the floodwaters of the Jordan River, and it was only as they took that step of faith into the floodwaters that the river stopped. Or after the step of faith in marching around the walls of Jericho for 7 days, after that step of faith, then God made a way for them to conquer the city. In the case of Mary, as the angel came to visit her, it was only after that Mary responded saying, "May it be to me as you have said," that she conceived and gave birth to God's Son. It was only after Peter stepped out of the boat, took a step of faith, and stepping out of the boat that he was able to walk on the water toward Jesus. Most of the time, it seems that God intervenes in our life after we take some sort of step of faith, indicating that we trust Him in the process. The book of Daniel is filled with stories of faith, but it's also filled with people who just don't get it. In Daniel chapter 2, Daniel has interpreted a dream for King Nebuchadnezzar, and Daniel did something no one else could do, and in interpreting that dream, he gives honor to God, his creator, the one whom he worshipped. Nebuchadnezzar was so thrilled that he said to Daniel, "Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries." Nebuchadnezzar honored Daniel's God at that point, and yet as time goes on, Nebuchadnezzar forgets about Daniel's God. And it's sometimes later that we come to Daniel chapter 3. And Nebuchadnezzar turns around and instead of encouraging people to worship Daniel's God, Nebuchadnezzar creates an idol. He creates a gold statue that's 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide. And he summons everyone to come before the statue and to bow down and worship the image. Well, Nebuchadnezzar had been so enthralled by the power of Daniel's God. And yet, in time, instead of worshiping Daniel's God, the creator of the universe, it seems that Nebuchadnezzar is looking for worship himself. He's looking for his own power. He's looking for his own control over the people. You know, if we're not careful, we too can lose track of genuine belief. We can have a very genuine faith experience in choosing to follow Jesus, and yet it's easy to allow idols to come in our lives that will distract us, that will divert our attention. Maybe it's the idol of knowledge. Maybe it's the idol of pleasure. Maybe it's the idol of power or the idol of work. Or maybe it's the idol of money. You know, as Nebuchadnezzar built this idol for the people to worship, I'm not so sure that he thought that this idol really had any power. But it was an issue that as Nebuchadnezzar commanded that people were to worship this idol, he had power over them. And I think that that's what Nebuchadnezzar wanted. Nebuchadnezzar wanted control of the people. And he told them that whenever they heard the instruments, whenever they heard the instruments to play, that they were to fall down and they were to worship this idol. And anyone who did not fall down would be thrown into a blazing furnace. When the instruments sounded, most fell down and worshiped the image, except some of the faithful Jews, in particular Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And I want to pick up the story for you in verse 8. It says, "At this time some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, 'O king, live forever. You have issued a decree, O king, that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold. And that whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into the blazing furnace. But there are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon. They are Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, O king. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold that you have set up.'" Verse 13, "Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, 'Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? Now when you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music, if you are not ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?' Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, 'O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us from it, and he will rescue us from your hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your God or worship the image of gold you have set up.'" Now, I want you to recognize something about the faith of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Verse 16, they said, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter." These three teenagers were not intimidated by the king. They weren't going to be intimidated. They weren't going to be strong-armed. They were not going to compromise or abandon their convictions because of his pressure.